Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian. I'm co-founder at Ruby Reese and I will also be your host. This week we're talking about one of the most important dog training topics that's out there, recall training. And I suppose a lot of us dog guardians don't think about recall training quite as often as we should, and maybe we should be doing more regular training of it. Certainly if you walk into any park up and down the country, you will likely bump into someone shouting across the field to say, oh, he's friendly, as their dog, completely out of control, runs towards you. So having 10 out of 10 recall, some people think it's impossible. We beg to differ and think that if you need to have 10 out of 10 recall, it's probably going to be in a situation that you don't expect, you don't see it coming, and it could have an awful lot of gravity. So much gravity that it could be life or death for your dog or for a member of your family. So if that doesn't drill it home, I don't know what will. But to talk about such an important topic, and a topic that so many people struggle with, I've had the absolute pleasure of speaking with Siobhan Owens. Siobhan is better known to some of you as Dublin Pet School or as Meath Pet School, and now I invite you all to listen in to the brilliant chat that I had with Siobhan. Hello Siobhan, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast this week. How are you doing?
I am absolutely super, thank you.
Would you do us the pleasure of introducing yourself, please?
I will indeed. So my name is Siobhan Owens. I currently own Dublin and Meath Pet School. I live with 15 dogs and one foster dog. So if anybody would like a nice collie, let me know. We have 4 cats, one African grey parrot, 2 parrotlets, and 1 boa constrictor, 2 donkeys, 2 horses, and 6 chickens.
The list keeps going.
All in this mad house, yeah, absolutely. In at boy, we do have 6 acres of land, so we're not all in the house as such, but yeah, it's a busy home.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for coming on to talk to us about a really important topic that I'm sure loads and loads of people are interested in and maybe struggle with as well. So what exactly is recall training and why is it so important for dogs?
Well, recall training is your dog understanding that when you call them, they have to come back to you. So very simply put, that's it. That's what recall training is, your dog understanding when you call them, they have to come back to you. Why is it important? For no other reason other than safety. It is just, it's going to save your dog's life. It's going to get you out of trouble. So if somebody said to me, why should I put the time and effort into doing this? It's because it might keep your dog alive one day. So that is, for me, safety is the number one reason for doing recall training.
And I suppose a lot of people attempt to have good recall, or might think they have good recall, but then face problems and might give up on it, I suppose. So why do we face so many problems with teaching dogs to come when they're called?
Oh, lots of reasons. Owner expectation would be the number one reason, I'm going to say, just like that. So let's say you take your toddler to the park. You take your toddler to the park and they want you to hold her hand and bring them to the swings and the slide and everything. And 3 months later, you haven't got the gate open and the toddler is running in, and then you can't get them out of the park because they want to stay and have fun. That similar scenario can happen if you have a puppy and you take them out for walks. That puppy's going to stay right close beside you initially, right? Because you're what keeps them safe. So they stay close beside you and they're just getting used to the environment, and they might be a bit worried about the environment. So they're going to stay close beside you. But if you bring them to the same park every day and they start meeting up with some other dogs, then they start to go further and further and further away from you. And if you haven't put recall training in there, that's when you're going to see your problem. So your dog can drift off away from you without you realizing that you've created a pattern for walks that doesn't necessarily involve the dog coming back to you when you call them.
Mm-hmm. And there's lots of other exciting things going on in the environment to keep them going as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and the other thing that we tend to do is when we get problems with it is we call them back, and what we do is we put them back on the lead. Or we might even call them back and call them back and call them back, and eventually we come back and we give out to them. So what the dog is going to learn is, well, coming back to you not only ends the fun, but I'm going to get into trouble for it as well. So that's why we face problems. So it's the owner expectation who hasn't realized they have to put a lot of work into recall training for their dog, for it to be enjoyable for the dog to want to participate in the game of recall.
Okay, so they have to see it as a positive thing. Coming back to
Ab-
you is where positive
Absolutely.
things happen.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Absolutely. You really do.
And what age should we start recall training? And is it ever too late to teach an older dog as well?
Oh, I start recall training from the time that the puppy comes into my home. So it's never ever too late for that. Whether it's a puppy, an older dog, a foster dog, what I do is I very simply start by using their name, calling them and feeding them or playing or a little scratchy back, whatever it takes. And I start that from day one. And as I said, it could be a rescue dog. You've just brought them in, so you might be changing the name. So you want to pair that with something nice. And then you can do simple things. You're in the kitchen, the puppy's just inside the garden, and you call them and they come into you again. You can give a little scratchy back, you can praise, you can give them a little treat for that. So I start that from day one. And essentially is a recall is a dog responding to their name. That's what it is. We don't have to make it complicated, but that's what it is. That's what it comes down to. And then the second part of your question is it too late? It's never too late, but it's certainly more complicated. If
Mm.
you create a pattern, we go for a walk, we go in the park, I let you off the lead, I meet up with my friends, you meet up with your friends, we do a couple of loops of the park, and we go home. Then you've created that as a walk for your dog. That isn't necessarily anything to do with your recall training. Your dog is just back with you because we're all going to the gate, their dogs, your dogs, all back with you, we're all going home. Now let's say you move. Your dog is 5, you move, you're now in a park and you let him off the lead, and perhaps he doesn't come back because the new park he wants to
Mhm.
go and explore. Or he runs over to dogs in this new park and they're like, hey, who the hell are you? Go away from me. And there's a bit of a kerfuffle, and you realize your dog is not coming back when he's called. And a lot of people forget that actually one of the bylaws states that if your dog is off lead, it must be under effective control. And effective control is your dog coming back. And if it happens that you let the dog off lead and you call the dog, Ben, Ben come, and you call 3, 4, 5 times, and a kerfuffle happens and someone's dog gets injured, you're leaving yourself wide open to be sued because you have demonstrated that off lead your dog is not under control because you called them 3, 4, 5, 6 times and that dog did not come back. So is it ever too late? Absolutely not. But you do need to take accountability. You need to say, okay, this didn't work. The dog doesn't have a recall that I thought they had. It was completely dependent on environmental and situational. And now that that's changed, and I need to do something else to help that recall happen.
And I love that you emphasize the importance of recall, including under the law and under legislation, because it's difficult. Like, we're not undermining how difficult having 100% recall is. Like, that's the creme de la creme of recall, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's not an easy task, but it is doable, and so important. I suppose is important to underline, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is because, I had a lady come down to me who was met by a park warden and 2 ladies and was told that if she lets that dog off the lead again, that they were going to issue her with a fine, because the park warden had so many complaints about the dog. And the dog was a 6-year-old golden retriever, lots of energy, entire male, and he would go up to other dogs, and if they engaged and played with him, fine. But if they told him no, go away, or if the owner got upset, he continued to bother the dogs, often resulting in a fight. And the owner's attitude was, well, he's just going up to play. But that supposes that the other dogs want this dog to come up and play with it. So sometimes it is owner accountability, and we do have to be responsible for it as well. But we may not see it the way these people who are worried about your dog coming up will see it. Like I have two dogs who would not welcome the response from another dog coming up to them at all into their space. They are good with dogs they know and trust, but outside of that, they don't like dogs coming into their space. But sometimes people don't see that, and therefore they don't see it as being a recall issue because they think their dog is just going to play.
Absolutely, yeah. And what about different dog breeds then? Do you think so certain dog breeds are easier to train recall commands and others more difficult, or is that more of a myth?
Okay, so it's a yes and no question. I think it's a yes and no. I think
Hmm.
that, yeah, for sure, there are some dogs that kind of want to, what are we doing next? And they want to engage with the owner. You know, you could take, for example, your border collie, and if you create a pattern of, I take you out, I throw the ball, that dog keeps coming back to you for the ball being thrown, and therefore you've got not so much a recall as a game that means you can get that dog back on the lead quite handy, but that dog effectively is looking to hang out with you because you're part of that game. So that dog therefore is easier to train. But equally, you can have breeds of dog, for example, like scent hounds. You know, we bred them for hunting. We bred them to ignore the wind, the rain, all the terrain, the muck, the noise, and keep following that scent, keep going, keep going, keep going, therefore keep working away from me. And then we let our beagle off in the park and he gets a scent and he goes. So certainly genetics will play a part in it for sure. There are some dogs that can make the recall more difficult. I'll tell you a little story about a client that had a beagle, and he set off the house alarms by eating through the drywall. And his
Hmm.
head and body were halfway in the kitchen and the alarm went off. So he said that this dog is nuts. I can't let him off in the park. He'll just go and never come back. And we very cleverly, I got him to start playing a go find game for little pots, just little. We got the 150 for these 5 little tubs and deals, and you put some treats in it. And we lured him around the house, and we taught him to go find, and then he would go out. And he'd tie the dog to the goalpost so he could see him, time there. And he'd go and he'd put a pot here and a pot here and a pot around here. And then he'd start moving him under bushes, so they're a bit more difficult. Now, he kept the dog on the long lead, but the dog he fulfilled this need to go and find this scent. So he got fulfillment from it. The owner got enjoyment from the dog again, but it was controlled. So it wasn't exactly the off lead recall bit, but we got a win-win situation there. So for sometimes having them off lead and doing recall is not necessarily the best thing for that dog. What else can we do to meet a fulfillment but still have, so what he would do at the end of after he found the last one, he'd call the dog to come back to him and there'd be another reward here. And so we did get a kind of recall as such, but controlled and managed recall there, in that he always had the dog on the long line. He could clip the long line onto his trousers. The dog could have 15, 20 feet, and he got a purpose. So we took his genetics of a need to go and find something, and we just played with it to create a win-win situation.
And I love that because it comes down as well, like you mentioned, not only to the breed and but also to the individual dog, what their likes are and their needs are. So that's really
Mm-hmm.
nice to hear that there's going to be some sort of a solution for everyone. It mightn't look like the same type of solution to every single dog, but that there are different solutions. And I suppose you already started answering this, but what key are the key steps to setting up a successful recall training session for dogs?
So, setting up successful recall training session, I would first look at rewards. What am I using as rewards? So I've had clients come out with kibble, and in their little questionnaire I send before they come out to me, I will ask, how do you feed him? And they might reply with, oh, we just leave it in the bowl all day. And he picks at it whenever. And then they come out, and what they bought for a reward with them is the kibble the dog leaves in the bowl all day. So the setup for the reward for that dog, if you're using kibble for reward, is not going to be successful. That dog doesn't like kibble at home. He's definitely not going to enjoy it in an environment that's busy. And the next thing is look at the environment. If you've got a dog, and this did happen with several clients actually, with dogs that love footballs. The owner kicks the football ball up and down the garden for them. And then they go to a park and the kids are playing football in the park and the dog wants to run over and get the football. That situation is going to set that dog up to fail, right? So you might have to go and do your recall training away from this and replace the kickabout in the garden with something else like tug. So it's environmental. It's what you're using for rewards. It's, does the dog find it rewarding? If kibble is not a reward for your dog, he's not going to work for it. One of my border collies, Edison, my deaf guy, he would take kibble as a reward because, quite frankly, he'd eat grass for a reward. But most of my others would go, no. I'm not coming back for kibble. That's not going to work. So you do have to make sure that what you're offering the dog for reward, he actually wants as reward. So they will be part of your setup. What's in your tool bag? If he absolutely loves a ball, is the ball sending him away? Because people forget that when we throw the ball for the dog, it sends the dog further away. And if he's now 20 feet away from me and he spots something that gets his attention, it's going to be much harder to get him back. So what have you got in your tool bag that will bring him back? And look at the tools themselves. Are they rewarding? Are they helping you? If they don't help you, then, you know, there's no point in bringing them. Another one with the ball is the dog will take it and then he'll go away and he's not using it as a recall coming back to you at all. So environment, what you're using for rewards, are they valuable to the dog? They will be my top tips there.
And would you say it's kind of like steps going up a stairs or going up a ladder where, you know, you're starting off at maybe a lower challenge level and then increasing it, like you mentioned, in the back garden, or say even start earlier, maybe in your living room, very, very simple tasks, and then going into the garden, there might be more distractions, and then going to the local park when it's empty might be more distractions, and you know, that it keeps taking a step up every time. Would be a kind of a logical way to progress through training then?
Absolutely. And there are sometimes, Killian, you know, we've worked so hard. We start with the puppies. We start doing, I call them our trust exercises. So I'm getting the same response from my dog on the lead. So then I might drop the lead and let them go a little bit further and call them. Are they still coming back? So I start my trust exercises. And then there are some times when, and as dogs go through different development periods and they build up confidence in the environment, where Wednesday you got this fabulous recall and Thursday he's gone deaf and there is no recall there, and so you might have to go back a few steps. You might have to go back to putting the dog back on the lead, wondering what was going on there. And it you know, it can coincide with things that you may not be anywhere aware of. It can coincide with, now you've got a dog who's 15, 18 months of age. He's becoming socially mature. He's aware there's females in heat, and you brought him to the field with no one around, but he knows there was females in season and he wants to go and find them. So, but you're saying, but there was no one around. We didn't do anything different. I took his favorite toy with me. So there may be other factors that we're not even aware are happening, but your dog is aware of it. So sometimes you've got to go back down that ladder. You've got to come right back to baby steps. One of my dogs, my poodle, he is on a lead since we moved out here because he realized, if I run through the horse's electric fencing and I go way back into the back of that field, what's Siobhan going to do about it if I want to go and do it? So he'll go on a long line. Now I don't have to hold that long line. Once that long line is on him, he goes, oh, she'll just pick up the lead and bring me back. So there's no point. So sometimes you've got to look at the situation and you look at the dog themselves. And you've got to take the dog's personality into this as well. Some dogs, you know, they just think it's hilarious, the game of chase with the owner running after them. Who saw the video with Finton? All right.
Oh,
you see the
absolutely
video of Finton?
everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when I looked at it a couple of times, I went, oh, you know what's happening? Because Finton looks back at his owner a few times and then continues to run. And what was Finton seeing happening in the background? The owner was shouting, the owner was animated, and the owner was running with him, running after the deer. So everyone was involved in the game of chase, right? So sometimes you do have to go back a few steps. I mean, you definitely got to look at the environment. You got to put the dog back on the lead. But to start it, you start with the simple things, the very simple response to name, the reward, build a play into it. add in distractions. So have the kids come home from school and see will the dog come away from them and come back to you. So simple things like that. But if let's say you adopt an older dog, you have to assume you're starting with no recall. Don't assume because it's an older dog it will come back to you. So start with no recall. Assume you've got nothing and build your expectations up from that.
And you mentioned about the owner running with Finton. So, how should an owner handle a situation where their dog ignores their recall command? I presume running after the dog or with the dog isn't the best option.
It is not the best option because the dog thinks we're all playing the game of chase. Let's all chase whatever it is he's running after, and it can push them further and further towards the road. For example, if you're in a park that then has a road adjacent to it, so it can be dangerous. What I try to do is I try to take a breath and I say, okay, you're now 15 feet from me and I don't want you going any further. And dogs will often run they'll run in circles around us and around us, around us. And then often what happens is they get a smell or something. And that's when owners try to pounce. And when they do that, the dog runs back a bit further and then the game heightens. So if you take a breath and you watch and the dog has stopped, they'll be sniffing something. And as they're sniffing something, and if I have nothing on me, I will find something like a couple of leaves on the ground, or maybe a twig. And as he lifts up his head, that's your opportunity. So once he disengages from that scent before he's bolting, while he's stationary, you go, what's this? What have I got? I'm going to use my Finn, my poodle's name. Finn, what have I got? What's this? So your animation has to step up. You have to become the exciting thing all of a sudden. What have I? Come on, let's go. And I'm moving away a couple of steps and go, whoa, what's this? I'm like, it's crazy person out in the field, but whatever it takes to get my dog back. And I start, if it's a twig, I might trail it around the ground in figure of eights and I bounce away from the dog den and they come over. The curiosity gets them over and they might do this and be careful with this one. They'll come in a little bit and you reach to grab them. Don't let them come in a little bit. Bounce away from them again. Woohoo, you're not getting it. Oh, it's so good. Oh, I have it. What do you want? Do you want it? Are you ready to get it? And then when they get really close enough so you can just reach down and catch the collar or the harness, reach down then, but give them that stick. Even not to necessarily chew and swallow or anything like that, but have a little tug with it because they came back. Tell them they're brilliant. You get this half flight and fight response with yourselves where half of you wants to kill them because you were so worried they were going to get killed running across the road. Like you're like,
Yeah.
The only times that I really have heard myself shout at my dogs is when I was in fear for something for them, that they were going to be injured or killed. And then or then that panic when you go, oh my God, thank God you're here, you're safe, it's okay. So everyone just take a moment, just after you get them back and you put them on the lead, take the moment and have the little play with them, acknowledge that I got them back, we're safe, but then also say, okay, that happened. And I say, the universe gave me this information. What do I do with it now? It said, your recall's not that good. Your dog is finding fun somewhere else. You need to put them back on the lead. Because when we came out here, and Finn had a great recall, but when we came here, he was initially exactly what I said. He was like, as if I'd brought him to a new park. He was like, this is exciting, but I'm going to stay close because I don't know where I am. But within a couple of weeks of him realizing this was his home environment, he started moving further away. And I said, it's 6 acres I have, so I'm not going to run 6 acres after him. So he went back on. When I see what he was doing, I said, okay, you're going to go back on your long line and we're going to play tuggy again and bring you back in and we're going to feed you. And I tend to do 2 to 3 short walks a day, and 2 of them he'll have that long line on, and then definitely on one of them we'll come out and I'm going to have a food party. I'm throwing food here, I'm running away throwing food there, I'm doing some of our tricks and our skills and I'm keeping his attention with me, and then he's happy to come home with me because all of his needs have been met and I've got all the food, so he's happy. So you definitely have to, with a dog with recall, there are some times when you need to, if they're running off, you need to acknowledge that you've been given the information that the recall is not as good as you think it is. And you need to do something about it. It is not uncommon that I would have a client say to me, I spent 3 hours trying to catch my dog yesterday. And I say, okay, when was the last time you let them off the lead? And went, oh, well, the day before, I always let them off the lead. And when was the last time his recall was that bad? Oh, every day it's a battle. And I say,
Mm.
okay, well, the first thing we have to do is stop letting them off the lead. We've got to
Yeah.
stop giving them permission to run away here.
And going back to your strategies as well, you had some great ideas about making, picking up leaves and branches and being really excited and everything. I mean, you've got loads of experience with this. I'm sure lots of people listening in mightn't have that list going through their head of what they could grab at immediately. Would you say it would be a good idea to sit down and make a list of things that might interest your dog in the worst case scenario before you start
Absolutely.
giving them these privileges? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. What does my dog love? How do I do setups for recall? I'm not going to take out something he doesn't love or hasn't had exposure to. You might take out a squeaky ball, but I've had dogs terrified of the squeak noise, so it's not
Hmm.
a reward for the dog. So absolutely become conscious of what works for my dog, and that does require us having to know our dogs very well. And I suppose I live in a multi-dog household that and I would know my dogs because I would take them out as individuals and I do individual work with them. But if you have multi-dogs and you only ever take your dogs out as a group, you may not see the individual little bits that work for that dog, that really excite that dog. You may only have a recall because he's reliant on your other dog, your other two dogs coming back to you. So you need to individualize the dog. You need to see what works with this dog. Again, a common thing might be that I might say, someone said to me, well, this is my third boxer. My other two boxers went like this at all. And I say, that's because they're individuals.
Yeah,
Even if you were
absolutely.
twins, you're individuals. So it's because they're individuals.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you pointed out that you have to do training of dogs on an individual basis. Would you say that if you are going on lots of pack walks, let's say in your multi-dog household, would it make sense to have one sort of herding call that they all know that they have to return to you, if you know what I mean, rather than calling them all individually by their names?
Absolutely. Killian, you
Mm.
can hear and you can see that I'm an animated, lots of energy type of person. That's not always good for my clients. Some of my clients can't do that. Some of my clients can't bring the energy there. So, in answer to your multi dog question, and also for clients that are quite quiet, I would say to them, let's look at whistle training.
Mhm.
Let's look at whistle training and a trick because they don't have to be animated to use the whistle. They can just pick it up and whistle. Or if they can whistle themselves, great, even better. But we've got to train that whistle back at home and we've got to start building the trust exercises into the whistle so they will still be whistling on a long line. And the whistle is always, always paired with rewards. It's always paired. And it might be something that if I do some cooked liver for the guys, for if I have competitions, I might bring cooked liver with me, but I'm going to use my cooked liver for my whistle training. So I can do my multi-dogs back on a whistle. I don't have to remember their names. And I came from a family of 8 and my mother could call my name twice in that group of 8 because there was so many of us. And sometimes I'm looking at this dog and I'm using the wrong name for this dog. So the whistle eliminates all that. It's simple,
Mhm.
but you do have to condition it and you do have to do your trust exercises for that whistle training as well.
Can I just point out how cool it is once you actually have this trained as well and you've got a pack of dogs charging towards you? I've experienced it in Germany with the trainer that I used to do a lot of work with, and she had 16 dogs at the time, and of course we were playing with a couple of puppies and stuff like that as well. So they just join in the charge. But when she had a call, so it wasn't a whistle, but when she left out her call, 16 plus dogs charging towards you is just the coolest thing ever. So this is so worthwhile. If you're listening in and thinking this is so much work, honestly, the payback is amazing. Even the looks on people's faces when they see all these dogs charging towards you, it's fantastic.
Hmm, absolutely.
So we mentioned a lot of tools for dogs that are fully abled, but you also have experience in working with dogs that maybe might be deaf or might be blind. How does recall look with these type of dogs?
Okay, so safety has got to be your first and foremost. If it's
Mhm.
not safe, they just can't come off the lead. End of. There is no question. I don't care how good my dog's recall is. I would not be taking a deaf or blind dog off a lead near the side of a road. So safety is my priority. But how do I do recall for them? So with my dogs who can hear, I might do the response to name work. So I call them, I feed them. With my deaf dog, if he's looking at me, we can do a hand signal. But if his back is turned to me and he's on the lead, I would vibrate the lead. So I just shake it a little bit. And as he acknowledges that, I feed him. So I can then progress that to a long line. I pick up the long line, I shake it, and he comes back to me and I feed. And I always feed in close to me. I don't feed my hands outstretched here. I always feed in close to me. And if you repeat that and repeat that and repeat that, what will happen is your dog will start checking in with them themselves. So they will check in with you. So they get so far and they go, oh, am I getting a reward? And every time they look at me, I'm like, yes, good. And over here, and they'll get something for that. So something that fails recall is the owner wants to get rid of the rewards very quickly. And they want to get rid of them. I do it on a sliding scale. We'll reward every single one as a puppy, then 1 and 2 as a puppy, but always praise, always, hey, that was brilliant, that was a good choice, go play again, go on, go play. And then they come back maybe the second time and I say, okay, maybe I'll boost that with something. But with my deaf dogs, I'm going to 100% do that check-in, and they check in with me. And again, it doesn't have to be handfuls of something, one little piece of something, but rub them down, scratch the back, tell them they were brilliant. So when you train it often enough, they volunteer the check-in behavior, and that supports then your recall with a deaf dog. And again, if we have time, I told you I could talk for Ireland, right?
I love it. It's such valuable information, honestly.
With my deaf dog, I also decided to use a torch, a little light switch that I'd flick on and off. So these little clip-on little lights that you pick up anywhere, and I would clip it on, and you had 3 settings on it: stationary, off, and then flashing. So I did flashing, and I fed him, and flashing, and I fed him, and in the kitchen, and it was going great. And he could be a little bit further ahead from me, and I could flash it, and he'd see the flash on the grass and look back at me, and I thought, this is brilliant. Until one day, it was a winter's morning, we were walking, and maybe 50, 60 feet out ahead of us, there was people with dogs that had flashing lights on their collar. And my dog had his head on the ground sniffing something, and he lifts up his head and he sees all these flashing lights ahead of him. So he starts running towards these flashing lights, thinking it's me. And he gets halfway up, and of course I start calling him, because even though he's deaf, it's that panic, right, that's kicking in.
Yes.
And starts running towards these dogs, and he kind of got about 3/4 way up and went, oh, you're not my people. And then I see him looking around, and I start flashing then as well. And then he saw us, and then he came back. So sometimes we train as something and we think this is brilliant, and then something happens and you go, actually it's not that good. But the tools that I would have used for him would have been a vibrating lead and paired it with something, rehearsed it, so it then became a voluntary behavior. And then you're dropping the lead, and even now he'll go and play a little bit, and then he'll come back, and he's coming up to 6 now. He'll just come back in and check in with me. But I would still never ever let him off, near a roadside or somewhere like that. You're just going to end up in trouble very quickly by the time he comes back. The blind dog, a little bit different. So with the blind, the dog was just blind. So whereas Skippy is blind, now she went blind through a medical condition, SLO. So she had a lot of skills already. And so she went blind, but she can still hear, and she has a good recall, and she will come back to her name. So we use the skills they have, and they have, use the functions they have rather, and she could still hear. And if you have a dog who is blind and they can hear, then you need to pair that with something very quickly, and it could be close, and you're standing right beside them, you feed, and you could then have the dog's name, and we could say Reese close and feed, and then you stand back a few little steps and you say Reese close, so they follow the audio and they come closer to you, and then you feed. And again, I would take my baby steps, I'll use my lead, I use my long line, and I'll see, can they still come to the sound of my voice, can they still follow to the sound of my voice. But in the case of Cody, who's deaf, he's actually deafblind and epileptic. Cody is off lead here where we are because we have a section that he can be in and he's safe. But when I lived in Dublin in the suburbs, it wasn't safe for him to be off the lead. So
Of course.
you've got to have some, you've got to look at the situation for it. But you can train deaf dogs and you can train dogs who are blind, and even dogs who go blind because of age or a medical issue. You can still do work to support that. You can look at the skills they have and go back to reinforce it. You may not have reinforced it for years because they're now, 9, 10, 11, they're elderly dogs, but you can still go back and reinforce that just to help with that recall as well.
Yeah, I've heard people mentioning as well, recharging this recall, because you're calling them back from big distractions, right? When you really need to recall them, they're really interested in something. So it's important as well to recharge it. So I totally get that. And I love and really appreciate the fact that you shared all about training your dogs with limited abilities when it comes to sight and hearing, because that means the rest of us really have no excuse. It is possible. You will find your way to train recall with your dog. So that's brilliant. And maybe to wrap things up, are there any other recall misconceptions that you'd like to address before we finish up?
Let me see. Recall misconception. So I suppose things like, for example, oh, you can't train those dogs. So we mentioned sight hounds earlier on. So not sight hounds, scent hounds, but the sight hounds will be the same. You can't train them for recall. A lot of dogs you can train for recall. Probably, I don't have exact figures for it, but probably with the dogs that I have trained and I've worked with, that we probably are looking at 95% of these dogs, the recall training can massively improve, but maybe not get to the 100%. So you can train them. You just have to find out what works for that dog to make that recall successful. So you can train them. So the misconceptions might be, oh, you can never train. I remember reading an article that said if you didn't have a recall on a lurcher by 16 weeks, that you'd never have a recall on a lurcher. So you can, of course, train them. You just have to look at what's not. I take a problem and say, this is the problem. I have no recall. What's preventing that recall from happening, and break it down in the steps. It's because my dog finds what's out there so much more exciting than the person on the end of the lead. And then we have to look at the owner's skills then as well. So we have to maybe address the owner's abilities that is prohibiting the recall from happening. So a common myth could be simply that you can't train X, Y, and Z breed to come back. You can. A lot of the time, I'm not saying 100%, because there are some dogs that really, the pleasure of finding the scent, the pleasure of the chase will always out what you're offering them to come back to you. And with those dogs, you have to keep safety in mind. And I suppose another petty one I don't like is he should just come back because I told him to. Or I don't need to use rewards for him to come back, because he should just come back because I told him to. And I would always say to people, do you work for free? Do you expect to go to work every day for free? And do you expect to keep doing this job and traveling, commuting, and put 100% effort in and not being rewarded for it? And sometimes people forget that our dogs are sentient beings and they're autonomous and they come with their own genetics that we harnessed. We did this to them for years and years and years and years. And we need to take owner accountability for that as well. So yeah, there are some myths around dog training, that they can't be trained, or you don't have to use rewards. They should just come back because you told them to. And a lot of that lies in that older style of training, the do or die kind of techniques. I would say to people in that case, when I was in school, we had a young boy called John who sat next to me, and he wrote with his left hand. And one of our teachers used to slap him on the left hand if he tried to write with it and force him to write with his right hand. I said, what you did back then was wrong. And it is obviously still wrong. It remains wrong. So the training that we did 30, 40 years ago may not necessarily be right. I
Yeah.
did training back in 1989, and we always rewarded the dogs. We always had to bring our sausages and our bits and pieces and reward the dogs. It wasn't all wrong, but certainly a lot of it was. And so sometimes the misconception of he should come back because I told him to, we look at where the foundation of that is coming from, and it might be coming from a place where our dogs were afraid to do anything else. And so it's not necessarily true that they can't come back or won't come back or can't be trained, but we do need to address our behavior in that equation as well.
Definitely. So keep things positive, keep at it, keep working up the chain of difficulty in more and more challenging situations.
Yeah, for
Explore
sure.
different types of rewards, and you'll
Yeah.
get there eventually.
And also, I'm going to say, dogs will go for the gamble. So one of the skills for recall that my dogs can do, and even my deaf guy can do it all just on hand signal, is to come around the back of me and sit in between my legs. So it might look like this with, let's say, Zach. I'll say, Zach, come, quick, around. And so the sequence is he comes around the back of me, lands in between my legs in a sit or a down, and I might say, get your ball, or go round. What can you do? Oh, down. Brilliant. Good down. Have a treat. Go get your ball. Around. We're actually going back on the lead now. So they'll go for the gamble. If I did that around 10 times on the walk, and 9 of those 10 times we're getting a ball, we're getting a treat, we're being told we're fabulous, they're going to keep coming for that. They'll go for the gamble. So I don't just do recall back on the lead. It's recall praise, recall tricks, recall tuggy, and then maybe recall back on the lead. So think about your recall as in a jigsaw, and add the pieces of it together and say, well, if I do this twice, recall back on the lead, the third time he's gone, I ain't coming back to you. I've got a brain. I can think for myself. I know the game is finished. But if it's recall and spin, hand touch, go find, play tuggy, and then off you go and play, they'll come back. So don't be afraid to take those other tricks that you can be training at home, you can be proofing at home, and bring them into your walk. And therefore you improve your value. So I talked earlier on about the dog that finds something so much more interesting there. You improve your value as well. And we talked about dogs with different abilities. We do have to take the owner's abilities in here as well. I could have owners who are quiet and shy and they find it hard to be animated. So we as trainers, our responsibility is to look at the owner's ability as well in this equation and find a way to work together.
And here's, of course, where your tools come in and explore then the whistle and the rest of it, right? I mean, then they don't have to maybe jump around like a pelican that's found something or whatever.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
Amazing. Siobhan, thank you so much for coming on and making recall training sound so accessible and so fun and enjoyable. Ruby is definitely, I'd say, she might be maybe a 7 out of 10, depending on the situation. Well, obviously, in any situation, a 7 out of 10. So I think we'll have to work on getting her to 8, 9, and potentially 10 out of 10 as well, now that you made it sound so exciting. So thanks for coming on and inspiring me and hopefully lots and lots of others to up their game. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome. Enjoy your day.
Thank you very much, Siobhan.
Bye-bye.
And once again, a huge thank you to Siobhan for coming on and joining us on the podcast this week and sharing such useful tips all around recall. I really, really hope that lots of you will be able to put some of those things into practice. So if you would like to find out more about Siobhan and what she gets up to in her dog schools in Meath and Dublin, you can check out our show notes. You can find Siobhan's website and social media handles, as well as, of course, the Ruby Reese website and social media handles as well. If you know somebody that really, really would benefit from listening to this recall training episode, please do share it with them. And if you'd be so kind, please also consider subscribing or following this podcast wherever you listen to it. A huge thank you for listening in this week, and we look forward to seeing you every single Tuesday with yet another dog topic and wonderful guest just like Siobhan. Thank you once again, and see you again next Tuesday.